Good afternoon, wherever you are. We welcome you to this engagement. Today is our Tadat coffee chat, and in the house we have a guest from Tax Administration of Jamaica, Kevin. But before we proceed, I want to recognize and appreciate the presence of our guests who are coming from a number of countries, and also take this opportunity to appreciate those who are logged in using LinkedIn and the YouTube. We are seeing many guests. You're most welcome. I also take this opportunity to appreciate the Tadat Secretariat for organizing this engagement. This is one of the ways to share knowledge, and a number of countries are benefiting from this. I am called Ronald Nyenje Makumbi. I work with Uganda Revenue Authority. And the topic that we have is implementing quality management systems in tax administration. But before we proceed, let me invite our guest, Coven, to introduce himself. Thank you.
All right, good day, Ronald, and greetings to everyone who has joined in on this coffee chat. My name is Kevin Campbell. I am the Director of Policy and Projects within Tax Administration Jamaica, and it is indeed a pleasure to be joining in the discussion today. I look forward to sharing with everyone and also learning from everyone as we go through this discussion.
Thank you, Kevin. Today's topic is an interesting topic. Implementing quality management systems in tax administration. I know there are a number of countries that have tried, but they are all at different stages. It's like driving a car. Some have started and they're not moving. They're still in the same place. Others are on the journey. Others are stuck somewhere. Others have reached. But we all know that quality management systems is one of the initiatives that can really make an organization an excellent organization. It's about achieving excellence in what we do. So, but we know that Tax Administration of Jamaica has implemented these practices and they're working. So it's an opportunity to share. It's an opportunity to learn from you, Kevin. And I'm sure many of our guests are listening in. They want to know how to really implement quality management systems into their administration so that they can be able to really develop efficient and effective revenue agencies. Maybe before we proceed, can you tell us what quality management system is all about? In our audience, we could be having some people who may not understand what this concept is, and they would really love to know what it's all about.
Certainly, thank you, Ronald. And let me start with the analogy that you just gave regarding the car, because as you noted, there may be some administrations that have not yet started the car, still looking to purchase the car possibly, and there may be some that are on the journey. Some may have been stuck somewhere, some may have gone lost along the way. Now, Tax Administration Jamaica certainly has not reached a destination, because we consider quality management to be something that is consistently evolving, something that we should be consistently be working on. So we don't consider there to be that end destination that we're trying to get to. So while we work towards building the systems up, we are consistently looking towards improving that system, improving that car to ensure that we are able to take advantage of opportunities that may come up, take advantage of making our processes more efficient and effective. Now, a quality management system itself refers to that system of processes, that system of procedures that an organization has in place to ensure that the quality of goods and services that are provided are consistently high enough to meet the expectations of that customer. Now, for our revenue administrations, that customer would be the taxpayers. And we want to ensure that what it is that we're providing in terms of services consistently meet their expectations. Now, before we delve a little bit further, I think it's important to kind of touch on the concept itself of quality in terms of what is quality. When we say that even that car is a quality car, what does that really mean? And quality really speaks to the extent to which that product, that good, that service satisfies the intended requirements, satisfies the requirements of the customer. And what we want then out of a quality management system is having all of those processes in place where we can satisfy then the requirements that are coming forward. Now, those requirements, particularly for tax administrations, for revenue authorities, those requirements being one, be coming from the taxpayer, but also we have legislation in large part that would govern how we operate. There may be other regulations that may govern how we operate. And certainly within each organization, within each administration, there would be policies and procedures as well that we would need to follow. And having that quality management system essentially looks at how we integrate all of these to ensure that we're meeting the requirements stipulated by each of those stakeholders, each of those entities.
Wow. There are two keywords that are coming out from this conversation. One, you're talking about consistency. That is very critical. Right. That is very important. And then again, you are talking about excellency of the systems and of the processes. That is another important aspect of quality management. As we proceed, can you tell us how quality management or attaining it relates to TADAT good international practices?
All right. So there is a very strong correlation between the quality management system and the TADAT good practices. Well, first, let me say the international benchmark, the international standard for quality management is ISO 9001. The current version being 2015, and that standard specifies the remit, the standard for quality management systems globally. Now, there's an extremely strong correlation between those standards and what is and those good practices coming from that. And one of the primary areas that I wish to speak to is that of risk management. Now, one would know that risk management is essential as it relates to revenue authorities, as it relates to tax administrations, and it is critical that one identify and put strategies in place to manage and mitigate risk. And having a quality management system involves a risk-based system. That is an essential component of that system, effective risk management. So there's an extremely strong correlation there. And what is required in terms of having a quality management system would be having that process in place where you can identify the risk, where you can you would of course be ranking your risk. You would also be identifying the strategies for addressing your risk and consistently be able to monitor and manage these risks over time. There are other areas certainly where there are a number of correlations. When we consider service delivery, for example, and the extent to which one is seeking feedback from customers, seeking feedback from taxpayers as well, in terms of the type of service that is offered, how the service is being offered, and identifying strategies, identifying mechanisms for improving service offerings and promoting customer service excellence. That certainly, of course, would contribute to an improvement as it relates to voluntary compliance as well. So there are extremely strong correlations between the TADAT good practices and having your quality management system up and running. Having a quality management system, of course, as well, ensures that it's having it being fully functional, rather, ensures that you are compliant with the relevant laws and regulations. It involves the human resource as well, ensuring that you are able to establish clear roles and responsibilities for your tax administration staff. And importantly, And again, correlating with the TALA good practices, it promotes accountability, promotes transparency within the entity. We would be ensuring that tax administration staff are properly trained and have the necessary skills and competencies to perform their roles effectively. Similarly, we're talking about having the information systems, the technology systems in place to support the tax administration processes and things like taxpayer registration and compliance management. Again, we spoke to the effective risk management processes to manage not only the compliance risk, but also the operational risks that would come into play. And ultimately having that effective process in place for providing the taxpayer services and also managing any taxpayer complaints and general feedback that may come to play. So there is an extremely strong correlation between having that quality management system in place and again, attaining those good practices or being consistent with those good practices.
Oh, thank you, Kevin, for that. I know there is a journey that you've taken, and I know you should have met some challenges here and there. But before we get to the challenge, just a high-level kind of understanding. How did the senior leaders appreciate the quality management system? How did you decide to take it on?
You see, and that's I thank you for that question. That's a very important area to touch on, because without the support of top management, without the support of the senior leaders within the entity, it would be, I would say, impossible for one to have a fully functioning quality management system. That support is absolutely critical. Fortunately for Tax Administration Jamaica, certainly we had that support. We're able, the senior leadership led from the front. We're able to they establish their commitment. One of the key things that we established early in the process was a quality policy, which outlined the organization's commitment to quality management. And from the quality policy, we would then outline our quality management objectives, putting the team together, getting the staff on board and seeking to support the wider staff buy-in for quality management. But without that top management support, it is extremely difficult. I said earlier, impossible to get moving forward. Again, because there would also be a number of decisions to be made along the way. There may be resources that one would need to provide, whether human resources, equipment, technology support, etc. And again, in the absence of the senior leadership support, it is difficult to get moving forward. It is difficult for that car that you spoke earlier to continue along its journey to quality management. Absolutely critical to have that top management support.
Thank you so much for that. I think that is very critical. It's a very critical point. To implement it, the top management support is something that is fundamental. Otherwise, it can be difficult to take it to the next level. So as you started implementing, what kind of challenges did you encounter on the way in this process?
The first and I guess primary challenge that we encountered was having an understanding as to what essentially we're getting ourselves into. Now, the process essentially started with TAJ being Tax Administration Jamaica being approached to be a part of a wider project that was focused on public sector transformation. Now, one component of that project involved getting public sector bodies ISO 9001 certified. ISO 9001 being the standard, the benchmark for quality management system. So we were approached and to be a part of that project, and doing our research, doing the background work, we sought to identify what essentially is in it for us. Well, how do we benefit from this? And we did see some of the benefits. I guess we'd speak to some of those later in just a bit. But jumping into the process, I don't think we had a full understanding again as to what we were getting ourselves into. And as we went through, we learned a lot. We were able to identify some of the challenges, and we were able to pick up some of the challenge from some of the areas that we were not so strong in. And what we found, I think we underestimated the extent of documentation that was necessary in going forward. Now, having a quality management system in large part involves documenting, saying what you do, and also doing what it is that you say. And the extent to which we had that kind of documentation was limited. And so there was a lot of time spent in pulling together the initial documentation, pulling together, documenting the initial processes, the initial procedures in place, getting those in place did certainly take a lot of time. There's also the concept of some resistance to change from some staff members, because one has to navigate an environment where persons may feel that by introducing this concept, you are possibly bringing more work to the table, right? And so we had to incorporate a full change management process, a full change management process to help persons to understand what was going in place, to understand what was happening, and to also bring them to the point where they could see how it is that they're benefiting from this, and how essentially having this quality management system in place is not necessarily more work, but actually making your work itself a little bit easier. And but that resistance to change is something that may be coming up across a number of organizations in terms of how that is the process itself is brought across to staff members. Now, having your quality management system as well is also extremely resource intensive. Resource in terms of the human resource that may be required, also in terms of equipment that may be needed in order to ensure that what you're delivering is of high quality. And so there will be financial resources that need to be committed. Sometimes those were not always available immediately. And also resources in terms of personnel. Persons may be strapped for time in other areas, other priority areas. And so those resource constraints were also something that we had to consider. And in addition to that, one also has to consider one of the other challenges is the sustainability of the system. Now, we want the system in place, but we also want the system to remain. We also want the system to consistently improve as we go over time. And having that, again, with a limited understanding of your quality management system, some of the processes in terms of sustaining the system were not fully understood at the outset. And as we went through the processes, we were able to, again, identify where some of those challenges lie, identify some of those gaps, and had to start now planning for the sustainability of the system, which would include, of course, inclusion in your budget, consideration being given to having your quality management system coordinator in place to ensure that the required activities to uphold the system, to keep the system in place, would be continuing.
Wow.
So,
sustainability.
Right. So it is a complex process, but certainly not an impossible process.
Wow. How long did it take you?
Well, we started our journey in 2019, and at the time, it was critical that one establish the scope, and which would be a suggestion to even other revenue administrations who are continuing down this path, to establish the scope of your quality management system. And for us at the outset, we considered the physical scope in terms of the locations that were to be brought on board. And we chose one location. So it was an iterative approach that was taken. We chose one location initially. And within that location, we considered also the scope in terms of the processes that we were going to bring within the quality management system. So we brought four processes in, that being audit, compliance, taxpayer registration, and education, and taxpayer education and service rather, and also tax accounts and collection. So four processes were involved within our initial sojourn. Now, at the same time, we had to also consider, are there areas that we're excluding from the quality management system at this time? And there were some areas that we had to exclude, again, because those processes were not at the standard, or yet at the standard for inclusion within the system. But again, an iterative approach was taken where we were saying, all right, we're starting with these. As part of our continual improvement framework, we'll be looking to expand to other areas. So we're getting the basic framework in place and then building that out as we go along. And we have been seeking to do that. So subsequent to our initial the initial certification of our office, we have since expanded to an additional 3 offices, an additional 3 locations. Again, getting the quality management system on running in those areas. And each of those have been certified to the ISO 9001 standard.
Wow, very interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
sustainability, you've talked about it, is something which is very critical, because it's one thing to put a system in place and then you leave it there, but moving forward, how do you manage it? It's another thing which needs also to be brought on board when you are trying to make this process sustainable. Some of the key success factors, briefly, just what are they?
And we've touched on some of them so far. Strong leadership and that commitment from top management. Without that, success is would be extremely difficult. Having a clear objective for your quality management system. What is it that we see to get out of this? What kind of approach are we taking in implementing the system? Whether it's a full implementation at the outset, or we're taking an iterative approach towards the implementation of the system. Absolutely critical. Having employee engagement, having the employee involvement across the organization at all levels within the quality management system. The quality is not one person's responsibility. If it is that one were to establish a quality division or quality section, again, quality does not reside there. Quality is a full organization responsibility. And so employee engagement, employee involvement is absolutely critical if it is that the system is to be in place, if it is that the system is to work. Critical as well is the continuous improvement of your quality management system. It is sometimes said that if it is not broken, don't fix it. But when it comes to your quality management system, even if it is not broken, you want to see how can it be better. So the process is working, but can that process be improved? Can the process be more efficient? Can the process be more effective? Are there any areas, any gaps that still need to be plugged, even though one might be getting some of the desired results? But can those results themselves be further improved? And so the continuous improvement of your quality management system is particularly important, and again, something that I would consider to be one of the other key success factors that one would need to have. Critical as well is effective document control. Having a system in place, again, requires a lot of documentation. It requires documenting all your policies, your organizational policies, requires documenting your standard operating procedures, work instructions that may be provided to staff, having those in place. And in addition to whether service level agreements with other service providers, other entities, whether government or private entities that might be providing some form of support, or interested parties within your quality management system. And having effective document control is certainly important towards harmonizing all of that, bringing all of that together, and ensuring that persons understand what is required and are able to follow. And even if a new member of staff were to come on board, they would still have a clear understanding as to what the process is, what is that I'm expected to do on a daily basis in order to deliver quality to the taxpayer.
Wow, there are some questions that are coming from the audience. What considerations were made in determining where management of the quality management system was placed in Tax Administration, Jamaica?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
What considerations were made in determining where management of the quality management system was placed in Tax Administration, Jamaica?
I suspect that's referring to where the physical location was chosen, the actual location for the quality management system, right?
The coordinator and the PI.
All right. So let me start here. The implementation of the quality management system was projectized, right? And involved having a project manager in place to coordinate the full implementation, and also a steering committee as well as part of that process. Now, the location in terms of the actual physical boundary of the quality management system, that was chosen through the discussions between that steering committee and the executive of the Tax Administration of Jamaica, where we sought to identify a location, one, where we could be covering the four main core processes that we execute. Also a location that had the resources, had the staff, had the competence in place to be able to fully manage a quality management, manage and execute a quality management system. And coming out of those discussions, we were able to prioritize one location for implementation in the initial instance. And again, a similar decision-making process would occur, and we were then expanding to other locations.
Oh, I think your response also lists this question that is coming through. Was the quality management system rolled out once across the tax body, or it was first implemented in some areas?
That's right. So it was first implemented in one location. And again, the reason for that is we were just being introduced to this concept of having a quality management system. And this location was chosen again because of the extent to which it was able to meet the quality management standards that would be dictated by ISO 9001. And so that location was chosen. And having that really provided a learning opportunity for us, because we were able to identify what were some of the gaps that needed to be addressed. And so certainly as we moved to other locations, the process became a little bit more, a little bit easier for us, because again, we had the experience of prior implementation in one location.
Wow, that's interesting. Any political challenges that you had when implementing the quality management system?
Not necessarily. There were no political challenges come into play. However, what I will say is that one of the key tasks that we had to conduct initially in the system was conducting a pestle analysis, because we sought to do an analysis of the one. We did a SWOT analysis within the organization. We also did a pestle analysis where we sought to identify some of the wider political implications of the system, and to get a better understanding of our stakeholders, their interests, their needs as it relates to this quality management system. So we were, from those analyses, the SWOT analysis or pestle analysis or stakeholder analyses, we were able to rather develop a communication plan to keep persons informed and ensure that we were able to meet the needs of those stakeholders.
Wow, that's interesting.
But there was there would be support, particularly as the project itself was a part of a wider project that focused on public sector transformation. So there was political support for the activity, and that I believe would make the process easier if there is that sort of support coming from.
Okay, that's a good one. Now, you've implemented quality management system, and I believe you are now seeing the impact of this initiative. Can you tell the audience what the impact of quality management system has been to Tax Administration of Jamaica?
Wow, the impact for us has been great. First, let me start with our initial location. Starting there, one of the first things that actually let me start from another point. Before we started implementing the system, one of the key things that we had to do was a gap analysis. So again, we utilized the ISO 9001 as our benchmark, and we conducted a gap analysis to identify some of the areas where we were weak, where we were not complying with the requirements of the standard. Some areas where we did comply, and also there were some areas where we did not have the processes in place fully. So coming out of that gap analysis, again, we were able to identify some of those areas. So there were some areas where we were complying, some areas where we were complying, but we didn't have the documentation in place, and some areas where we just simply did not have the required process in place. And so we were able to fill those gaps. And so one of the key things coming out of the process was the documentation in place, having the full documentation in place to guide the work of our staff members. And this was certainly appreciated by them. Having those standard operating procedures in place, of course, leads to consistency in terms of service delivery across the organization, consistency across the location. And that was absolutely critical. That was one of the key things that came out of the implementation of this quality management system. Again, that kind of consistent service, irrespective of whoever might be delivering the service on a particular day. Again, the process would be consistent. Importantly as well, coming out of the process as we speak to impact is the improved risk management at all levels. Now, Tax Administration of Jamaica has an enterprise risk management section that essentially provides that general oversight, provides a broad framework for risk management across the organization. But risk is not the responsibility or the sole responsibility of that one entity. Risk is an individual responsibility. Risk is the responsibility of each individual, each location, responsibility of each manager, responsibility of each staff member in terms of identifying, managing, and saying, how can I address and manage this risk that might come into play within my area of work. And one of the key things that came out of this process is that improved risk management, that improved appreciation of risk management across all staff members. It should be noted, one of the things that we realized coming on, we were very good at identifying the risk, but in terms of consistently monitoring risk, it was not something that was consistently done, particularly at the local level. And coming out of this process, that is certainly one area that had improved significantly, where you have persons now owning risk and not necessarily seeing that as someone else's responsibility, owning even those operational risks at your local level. All of those are again considered, they would be increased efficiency in terms of the implementation of our processes. Again, we would know how we have our standard service delivery times. We're able to measure those as well. So there's improved service delivery across the processes as well. We also, coming out of this process, have an improved mechanism for managing customer feedback. And that is absolutely critical, having that mechanism in place. And we had it before. We considered the system to be in place, but through this journey, we're able to identify where some of the gaps within the system were, able to pull those together and be able to not only receive customer feedback, but also be able to act actively on that feedback that was coming in. One of the things that is required as part of this process is having what we call a management review. And as part of this management review, we're able to bring together the top management within the location, within the organization as well, and be able to discuss the plans, discuss our achievement of the targets that have been put in place, identifying areas of non-conformance, and also putting in place at that table what are some of the strategies going forward for addressing some of the challenges that have been identified. So we have a seamless process for again identifying those challenges. So our internal audit, our verification of processes, have that process in place, but also able to build on those and not be necessarily problem focused, but solution driven in terms of addressing those. And so the impact in that regard has been significant. Again, through the quality management system, or having that in place, we have a process in place now where we can identify where there are areas of non-compliance with established standards, those standards being our internal documentation or even legislation, identifying where there are areas of non-compliance, and critically, putting in place a plan to, one, correct those areas of non-compliance, but also implementing now corrective actions to, one, reach the root cause of these areas, and also ensure that we address the root cause and prevent a reoccurrence of those areas of non-compliance. So the impact for us has been significant. Again, it's something that we're still learning from, something that we're still seeking to build, something that we're still seeking to improve. And we anticipate that as we continue along this journey, there'll be even a much greater impact to come.
Wow, you've talked about consistency, and I know one of the critical issue is about continuous improvement practices. I don't know how your staff in Jamaica appreciated these practices, because that's how you can consistently maintain the system and also make the organization keep improving slowly but surely, and move forward. So how did you, because you need to build this as part of the organizational culture, how did you do it? How do your staff appreciate these practices of continuous improvement?
Thanks. Thanks for that question again. Again, something that is absolutely important. And we touched on it briefly earlier when we spoke about the importance of staff engagement, the importance of staff involvement in the process. And luckily for us, I think we had the foresight to ensure that we had that involvement from early. And so from again, the implementation was projectized, and as a critical part of the early initiation on the project, we sort of start that staff sensitization, start that the staff training regarding the quality management system. So there was a full change management plan, full change management and communication plan that was built out at the outset of the project, and then rolled out as we started the implementation going forward. So that involved training and sensitization with all members of staff at the location. And when I say all members of staff, I mean everybody, every single individual who's working at the location. From they have the general managers at the location, other taxpayer service persons, other managers, supervisors, other staff members, or cleaning staff or support staff. Anybody who is at the location would have been a part of the sensitization sessions. I would consider that to be critical, because again, quality is not one individual's responsibility. It's not the responsibility of the manager. It's not the responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility. And if there is any breakdown at any point within that chain, it has the potential to affect the final outcome. And so we expect that when somebody enters that office, the moment you're greeted, whether outside by a security guard or whoever, we should be having that kind of quality experience coming forward. And again, so the staff involvement is critical. We had those the training and sensitization with staff members, and training and sensitization focus in some ways on what a quality management system is, but also what the expectations within a quality management system are. How do you, as an individual, benefit from having the system in place? And at the locations, they also did a number of other work. They set up, for example, their ISO, their quality management sections, where one could receive information on quality management systems, brochures, flyers, etc. They had their competitions as well. Again, to kind of generate that kind of excitement, generate that kind of having persons feel involved in the process of implementing the quality management system. We also took the opportunity to, as part of the communication process, to deliver to our staff members consistent newsletters, again, speaking to various areas within the quality management system, and ultimately seeking to have staff see their involvement and see how it is that they are a critical part, a critical component of this system. And again, I'm just reiterating, that is not just one staff, not just the top management, not just managers, etc., but all staff members. Absolutely critical that they are fully involved in the process.
Wow. There's something that you have mentioned. Even the sweepers were also involved. They are involved in this process.
Yes,
even
certainly.
The cleaners are involved. Everybody in the organization is part of this.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Thank you. There's a question that is coming from the audience. We are on the journey to get ISO 9001-2015 certified as well. Let me see. At our organization, did you have to form a new department for quality management system?
Not a new department per se, but let's start with the implementation of or getting our journey rather towards ISO 9001 certification. So as noted, there was a steering committee that was formulated. So not a new department, but would pull subject matter experts from existing departments together. And those persons put together as part of that team would involve one, the project office, of which I am a part, but also you have the communications specialists or organizational development and change management specialists were a part of that, or strategic planning department would have been a part of that as well, or internal audit, again, a critical component of that. And so we were pulling together, in addition to the subject matter experts from the were responsible for delivering the core processes themselves at the location. So it was a team pulling together persons within the organization, as opposed to setting up a completely different department for delivering the process. Now, as we look towards the sustainability of the system, we see where it is necessary to have in place a coordinator of the process going forward. So as we move from a project towards having this being fully integrated within our systems and processes, we are now looking to have that ISO coordinator in place who would have the responsibility for the overall coordination of that quality management system going forward. Again, what is critical though is that the documentation is in place to support that in terms of what those responsibilities would be, or the responsibilities of the partners at each location would be within that structure, and having again that kind of process flow in terms of how things would be, the decision-making processes, etc., for that quality management system. Now, while we are not necessarily going down that route, it would not necessarily preclude another revenue administration for setting up a department for quality management systems or for implementing that. What is critical again though is that the structures are in place where it is clear what the responsibilities of that section would be vis-a-vis the responsibilities of other departments, because again, quality would be everybody's responsibility. So having that kind of process flow in place, should a department be set up, would be certainly necessary, and having the documented procedures for executing the various responsibilities, again, critical.
Wow, thank you. There's a question that is coming from the audience. What is the most effective approach for rolling out quality management systems in tax administrations? Would an iterative approach apply whereby you choose specific processes to start with? And if yes, which processes were prioritized by the Tax Administration of Jamaica?
Right. We chose an iterative approach, as noted earlier, where we started with one location and then start to move to other locations. And even within that approach, again, we had to select particular processes to start with. So the core processes that we had within our initial implementation would be the taxpayer service and education processes. We looked at our tax collection, tax accounts and collection, audit and compliance. Those were the core processes that we sought to implement. Now, within those, there were some though that within those core processes, there were some areas that we sought to not include. Tax Administration Jamaica has the responsibility for administering collecting driver's license fees and administering much of that process. And there were some elements within that, particularly as relates to substitute driver's license, driver's licenses that we sought to not include within the scope of our process here, particularly because it involved other external parties, and we were not at a point where we could guarantee quality coming from external parties. So those that were within our scope of control were the processes that were prioritized for inclusion within our quality management system. So an iterative approach was selected by us.
Kevin? I hope we are not losing you, Kevin. Sorry, we could have lost Kevin.
Ronald, can I come in there very quickly as is trying to recover his system?
Yes.
I noted some people from Uganda Revenue Authority are talking about QMS and how to implement, or asking how to implement and the best way forward. What is Uganda Revenue Authority trying to implement? And how far down the journey are they in getting this implemented? I've seen Linda Namayanja, I've seen Dennis Kato asking those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zake, for that. Kevin is back.
Right, I'm sorry, not so sure what happened there where I left you.
Yes, we lost you, but now you're back. Thank you so much for coming. There are some questions that are coming from the audience. Did you have a lead consultant to guide the implementation of the quality management system project? If so, what were the critical terms of reference of procuring that consultant? Thanks.
Well, there was a consultant in place. The consultant was recommended to us through the project that we were a part of. But it is important that that consultant, one, is qualified in the area. The consultant that we had was an experienced lead implementer for ISO 9001 systems, but also was a person who was also involved within the auditing of quality management systems. And so that is critical, that experience, not only in terms of the lead implementation, but also in terms of the auditing of those systems, because ultimately you're getting to a point where your system would be audited by the certification body. And you want to ensure that you have somebody who can adequately and expertly guide you towards that process.
Thank you. Something related to the project team that you talked about. There's a question from the audience. Did you have to disband the team after implementing this project?
So we have not gotten to the point yet where we have disbanded the team. Again, there was a steering committee that was in place, but the expectation is that those responsibilities would continue because they have been incorporated within the responsibilities of the various departments. So, for example, as part of this team, we would have our internal audit, who would be one member of our steering committee. What built into their work plan going forward would be the continued internal audit of the quality management systems. So the responsibilities, so while the team itself may not meet as often as we would have while we were executing the project, the responsibilities have been integrated within their have been carried forward in their responsibilities in their work plans going forward.
Okay, there's one thing to integrate, but again, you talked about continuity.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have somebody to oversee or to make sure that you do not lose sight over this quality management system in the organization as you move forward?
Mm-hmm. Right, and currently the team, as I noted, the team is not fully disbanded, and that team would currently carry that responsibility. What we want to do, however, is get to that point where we have an ISO, a quality management system coordinator in place, would again have that responsibility for ensuring that continuity, providing that general oversight, the implementation and management and sustainability of the quality management system.
Oh, thank you so much for that. Let me look for another question. There's a question here. Okay, are there complementary quality management system management arrangements stroke approaches in Jamaica that are known to Kevin? And in that regard, has Tax Administration of Jamaica set up a mechanism of comparison and or peer-to-peer review?
I didn't get the first part of the question, I'm sorry.
The first part was arrangements in Jamaica that are known. I think I answered this question, but the most important one, whether you set up a mechanism of comparison and or peer-to-peer review.
Okay. Well, we have benefited from from that initial project. In the sense that under that initial project, there were a number of public sector entities that were involved in seeking to get this certification, seeking to build out their quality management system. And through that entity, through the certification, through that project, through the certification body as well, they've had the opportunity to liaise with other public bodies who are having a quality management system and also be pulling together some best practices, learning from each other as we continue the implementation of our systems. So there are some of those entities that have set up specific departments for quality management and are executing in that regard. And again, even coming from the discussions coming from the peer-to-peer liaison with these entities, we are able to identify some good practices, able to identify discuss some of the challenges that we're having, and identifying some of the means through which we can address those challenges. One of the key challenges that would have come up in those discussions is staff resistance to change. And again, through that kind of networking, through those kind of forums, we're able to identify some strategies to address some of those issues that have come up.
Thank you for that. Now, Kevin, maybe if you wish to share with the audience any specific process in Tax Administration Jamaica that you think quality management system has impacted, has really helped to change, to be more efficient and to be more specific. Any one process or two?
The thing is, the impact has been general across the processes that we have, particularly because we are a fairly, let me say, a fairly young, we have a fairly young quality management system. As I said, we started this journey in 2019, and the impact is really across processes. The impact is really across processes in terms of having the documentation in place for each of these processes. And this was something that was not necessarily there before. And even going through this journey, even coming through our verification of our processes and our internal audits that are a part of this, that are a key component of our quality management system, we're able to check on each process and identify identify where there are areas of non-conformance, and again put the strategies in place to address those. And those areas of non-conformance really came across processes, in particular those that relate to taxpayer service and education. There were a number of non-conformities, particularly because those processes are highly, that's where the bulk of the processes are, and there is a significant integration of those processes across the organization. And so coming out of those non-conformities, we're able to again put strategies in place to address them, prevent a reoccurrence. And so the impact really was across processes. I wouldn't want to single out a specific process, again, because we were able to see where that impact came right across the board.
Wow. Okay. I think this is information. URA is on the journey to implement ISO 9001-2015 certification of its processes. We got an external consultant that came and did trainings, that is foundation, implementer, and lead auditor courses. The information stops there. I don't know whether we proceeded beyond that or, but that is what is coming through.
But if I could touch on that comment just a bit, because we similarly, as I noted, we did have an external consultant that came into play, that came on board, and similarly did those kinds of trainings, did the foundation trainings, what our quality management system is, trained or auditors, trained or other staff members, provided some training regarding the sensitization approaches and so on. Similarly, there was a second, a prior consultant, however, who did our gap analysis for us, who led that process of our gap analysis to identify again where some of the gaps were within our quality management system in relation to the ISO 9001 benchmark. And the use of the application of the consultant was particularly necessary, because again, you're not coming to the process with a full understanding as to what is required of the standard. And the consultant, a good consultant, again, would be able to guide you along that journey. And so there was a training that came into play, but coming out of the gap analysis, we would identify some of our targets going forward in terms of some of the key areas that we need to address in order to have our quality management system being fully up and running. And the external consultant then not only would have been involved in the trainings, but would also be providing that kind of support in terms of identifying where we were on the journey towards addressing some of the gaps that came up through the gap analysis.
Now, after the consultant, do you have an interim team now within Tax Administration of Jamaica that is really helping us to take, or helping you to take this initiative forward?
Well, through the initial implementation, again, we were new to the process when we started. As we continued, we were able to participate in a number of trainings and a number of courses and build our capacity in quality management systems. And to that end, we are now at a better place compared to where we started. We now are seeking to have that coordinator in place, that ISO coordinator in place, that quality management system coordinator in place, who again would provide that kind of overall structure, that kind of overall framework, that kind of overall management of the quality management system.
Oh, now among your top management team, do you have people who have trained either in foundation, in implementer, or auditor? Do you have those people who have been certified in those areas?
Right, so we have been able to pursue certification. We have been fortunate in that regard, where we were able to secure some funding for that. And so there are persons within the organization who are so certified.
Okay.
And that is speaking to certified in terms of implementing ISO, implementing quality management systems, but the sensitization would again be right across the board, from the senior management, the Commissioner General, or would have been participating in sensitization trainings towards building out their knowledge of and understanding of the requirements of a quality management system.
Okay, somebody's asking a question, which I think is very important. You talked about gap analysis and also the trainings. Which of the two should come first?
Which of the two?
Should come first, gap analysis or training of staff? Okay,
well, we started with the gap analysis, and I think that is critical. The gap analysis, again, having the benchmark being the ISO 9001 2015 standard, having that benchmark, but it is important at the outset to understand where you are in relation to that benchmark. And so we consider the gap analysis to be one of the key things that should be coming at the outset. As part of that gap analysis, we would be identifying where those gaps are, and we identifying what are the strategies that need to be put in place in order to fill those gaps. And one of those strategies then would involve training of staff towards understanding again their responsibilities as it relates to the quality management system. So that training came after the gap analysis. However, I want to point that beyond the training specifically, there would be sensitization that would have started at the outset. So sensitization in terms of just advising staff as to what is happening, what is to come, what are some of the expectations relating to a quality management system. But the real core training would come after the gap analysis. That kind of sensitization is would really be more geared towards ensuring that staff is involved, staff is aware as to what is happening, and preparing staff for what is to come as it relates to the full implementation of this quality management systems.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Now, Tax Administration of Jamaica does not operate in isolation. It works within a given environment. How did you ensure that your stakeholders appreciate this initiative of quality management system, and how did you let them know what you are implementing? How did you involve them?
Right, so one of the key things that occurred at the outset again would be that kind of analysis, that kind of stakeholder analysis of our internal and external stakeholders. And from that analysis, we identified who the key players are, who is interested in, who stands to benefit, who requires information from us. There would be a stakeholder plan that was subsequently developed and executed. And from that plan, we were able to we package the information, package our communication strategies to communicate that to the various parties. Internally, again, that would focus through primarily to our meetings, through newsletters that were communicated to staff. Externally, depending on the stakeholder, that may be in the form of reports to our board, to the Tax Administration Jamaica board, to our Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, under which Tax Administration Jamaica falls, and also to other meetings and discussion points. We will be able to provide that kind of information. But it is critical that we have those stakeholders involved, that we keep them aware as to what is happening. Again, because there's a number of support that will be required across the full spectrum of our internal and external stakeholders.
Wow, lovely. You see, we want consistency. We've talked about consistency. How often do you do reviews? How do you flag any gaps that could be existing in this entire process of implementing the quality management system in Jamaica?
Thank you for that. Again, a very important question. Now, our internal audits are conducted towards identifying where some of those areas of non-conformance may be, and where we are not complying with existing standards, we're not complying with requirements, and again, that would come to our internal audits. Now, our internal audit team is pretty stretched, and certainly you would expect, as we expand to other locations, here the human resource is again limited towards to fully cover all those locations. But the audit, though, the audit is that it is based on risk, and so our auditors audit based on risk. They have been able to train auditors, additional auditors across the organization, who are able now in a position to provide that additional support towards internal auditing processes. It's something that we have been able to do consistently. Currently, each location is audited annually by our internal auditing team. What we have sought to build out and seek to get persons to appreciate is that we are not waiting on an internal audit to identify where the gaps are. As part of your regular management, your regular supervisory responsibilities, you should be seeking to identify where there are areas of non-conformance, seeking to document these, seeking to identify the corrections to address these issues, and also putting in place the corrective actions to prevent, to identify and address the root cause, and so prevent a reoccurrence. So our structured or formal process would be something that is done annually to our internal, where they would again go into each location, but on a daily basis, it is expected as part of your management responsibilities, your supervisory responsibility. You are also looking out for this. You're also looking for areas where there are gaps in terms of the quality that would be coming into play. We noted as well that the organization is certified to ISO 9001:2015, and as part of that certification, in order to maintain the certification, there is a surveillance audit that is done annually. And so from that entity, from the certification body, we also have to participate in external audits of our quality management system annually. And those are particularly beneficial as well, because again, you're having an objective eye coming into play to look over your system to identify some gaps, to see where it is that that you may not be fulfilling the full requirements that we seek to fulfill. And so the auditing, that kind of review occurs at a number of different levels. Again, just to summarize, again, from the level of the certification body, which is annually, to our internal audit processes, which again would be done annually, and also importantly, for managers and supervisors at the local level.
Wow, thank you. Now, Kevin, in this process of documenting processes, were you able to identify processes that you think are not necessary in Tax Administration of Jamaica, or you you just documented everything that was there and you moved on? Did it help you, that process of documenting, did it help you to identify what is critical and what is not critical so that you are able to really develop and come up with an efficient and more effective revenue agency?
Right. So in terms of the processes that we have, there would be no change in the processes per se that we have. However, there may be changes in terms of some of the steps within that process. So as we start to document the various processes, we were able to identify some areas where some of the steps were either redundant because of changes within the environment. There may have been some technological changes, etc., that made some steps redundant. And as opposed to just continuing something because that is how we always did it, it brings a strong appreciation as to, is this necessary? Is this step within the process necessary? Is it contributing to your overall intended outcome? And so there were a number of steps within the process that we had to recalibrate, that we had to re-engineer for greater efficiency. But in addition to greater efficiency, also looking at ensuring that we have the adequate controls in place, because again, we're looking at our risk management processes as well. And so there were the steps that were also added to ensure that we have those controls in place. So there was that kind of engineer of the various processes. No full change in terms of saying, okay, we're not doing a full process anymore. But again, within that process, there would be a number of changes that would be coming into play. And what the journey again has enabled us to do is to identify what are the inputs that are required to our process. So we'll be able to fully document what are all the inputs that are required for this process to be successfully executed. What are the steps that are involved within the process? Step 1, step 2, step 3. Who is responsible for executing these steps? What are the resources that are required to execute these processes? Resources, and we're talking resources in terms of the people, resources in terms of the equipment, for example, resources in terms of or technology that may be necessary for these. What are the controls as well that need to be in place for these processes? What are the overarching controls? So how do we prevent fraud and corruption? How do we prevent these processes from? How do we ensure that these processes are executed as intended? And we also seek to document what are the outputs of these processes. So what is expected to be generated at the end of the day coming out of these processes? Now, that is something that we did not have in place prior. So while it's something that we had an idea of, in terms of having it documented, that was not in place. And that was certainly important as we go forward, because it allowed us to build out the processes in greater detail. And coming back to your initial question, identify where some of the gaps might be, identify where some of the redundancies might be, and also address those and improve the processes for greater efficiency.
Wow. Two things are coming through this discussion from what you've just presented. We have the internal audit, which is supposed to audit and see whether there are gaps or whatever. But there's also an element of process management. I don't know whether you have a specific team in Tax Administration of Jamaica that specifically focuses on these processes to ensure that they are consistently efficient and effective. You talked about removing unnecessary steps from these processes. How do you ensure that those unnecessary steps do not come back into these processes?
Mm-hmm. So having the effective document control is particularly important, and having the documentation itself is important. And so that's where that focus was, ensuring that we have those, ensuring that the updated documentation is communicated, so is reviewed first by staff and communicated to staff what the specific steps are. So again, staff will be trained in terms of those standard operating procedures, because it's important that we have that kind of consistency across. And certainly through the various audits that we have now, we will be assessing the extent to which we are complying with the procedures that we have. Importantly for us, while we have those procedures in place, again, our focus is on continuous improvement. We have to consistently see how we can improve those procedures. And so we seek to identify from any staff member, are there opportunities for improvement? Where there are opportunities for improvement, we have a section of forms and manuals team who has the responsibility. We start with the responsibility for updating our standard operating procedures. Once they initiate that process, we'll be consulting with the various subject matter experts, and we have what you call a standardization committee, which would involve stakeholders from the various offices, the various locations, would be reviewing the documentation and signing off on the procedures at that level. Again, the expectation is that it would not be changed per se at one office, but whatever change is made is something that is consistent across the locations that come under the quality management system. And it is the documentation that we are guided by. So someone, quite frankly, you're executing a process at a location, you find a more efficient way of doing it. That is fine. But what we want is to be able to ensure that we have that documenting those opportunities for improvement. Again, so we can ensure that kind of consistency across the board. Wow. And also ensuring that we don't just revert to old habits, revert to what it is that we did previously, and or the various audits would be picking those. Again, with a focus on risk, again with a focus on ensuring that we have the adequate controls in place to address any of these issues that may come forward.
Wow, very interesting. Somebody's asking, which other organizations or countries did you benchmark with during this journey?
But you see, interestingly, when we started, we started to identify other tax administrations that we could benchmark along the journey. We were not very successful in that regard at the time. So it was difficult to identify other countries, but we had the benefit again of local organizations who were involved within with quality management systems, primarily those within the private sector, because there were not a lot of public sector entities that already had a fully functional quality management system in place. In fact, those who had such a system were on a similar journey as us, trying to find our way within this quality management maze. And but we were able to lean on each other, lean on the support of the various partners locally, and work together in that regard towards again seeking to identify where some of the best practices are, some of the areas of good practice, and discussing some of the challenges that we're having, and identifying again some of the solutions that we can have going forward.
You've talked about removing unnecessary steps from the processes. I don't know how that approach affected your staffing levels.
Mm-hmm. It well, first the staff was grateful because what a number of them would have complained about prior was the absence of the documented steps. And so staff was grateful that they have now the documentation to guide how it is that they are executing their responsibilities. And so I would say it affected staff level in that regard. It affected it positively in terms of staff morale, in terms of having again your procedures in place, you have a clear understanding as to what is required of you. And certainly where we have new staff coming into play, where we have new staff being onboarded, as part of your initial training, your initial orientation to the space, you have now the documentation to guide you on your work, the documentation that speaks specifically as to what your responsibilities are, and in terms of the steps that you're expected to follow, the documentation in terms of where these processes interlink with other processes, the documentation in terms of what are the expected outputs that you're supposed to be delivering. And to add to that, to just speak a little bit further to that, the documentation not just speaks to a definition of the processes themselves, but also some of the other broader policies and procedures that guide the organization. And again, ensuring that we have that kind of documentation in place. It supports the staff in terms of having a fuller understanding as to what is required of them as they go about their responsibilities. Having our quality policy in place, having a clear understanding as to what our quality objectives are, and being able to monitor those on a monthly basis to see where we are in relation to those targets, in relation to those objectives, has been certainly important and something that has been valued by the staff. Certainly they see where they are contributing to, to the overall objectives of the organization. And it is critical that persons see themselves as part of that process. So when we're talking about the mission of the organization, when we're talking about the strategic planning, the strategic plans of the organization, it's important that persons are able to see how it is that their individual actions contribute to the overall achievement of the organizational objectives. And through this process, we are able to show that kind of alignment where persons see the value of their work and see how it is that their individual actions on a daily basis contribute to the overall revenue collection targets, contribute to the overall revenue administration in Jamaica.
Wow. There's a way staff are affected by this entire process. Can you tell the audience how this initiative feeds into the performance management processes? Because staff are required to do certain things to ensure that this system works. So how does it feed into the performance management system of Tax Administration of Jamaica?
Right. So Tax Administration Jamaica has that performance management system where we again would be developing our work plans for our strategic plans for the organization. Those being cascaded down to each location where you would be having your operational plan for your location, your work plan for your location. That is further cascaded down to what we call key result areas for each staff member. We would be identifying some of the key targets that you need to be executing in order to deliver on your area of work. Now, as part of our quality management system, again, we would be reviewing those on a monthly basis. We would be identifying the targets that need to be achieved, and again, consistently seeing the extent to which we are meeting those targets. In the areas where we are not meeting the targets, again, it is important that we are now seeing, all right, what kind of strategy now needs to be put in place to improve performance in this area? What is the root cause of the non-performance in this area? Is there something that needs to, are there resources that are necessary? Is it training that is necessary? Again, coming down to what the root cause of the issue is and putting in a strategy now in place to address those. I want to say though, that the implementation of the system is particularly intensive. I know we've been speaking to a number of the benefits, a number of the positive impacts that surround the system, but it is also important to know it's a complex process, a process that is very intensive, that requires focus and attention, which is why certainly that kind of coordination is needed from a top level towards ensuring that the various processes are executed right across. Because what you have, we integrated as part of a plan, do, check, act cycle. So as part of the planning, we're doing our strategic planning through our operational functions. We're executing what it is that we have planned. We're checking as part of our internal auditing processes, as part of what we call our quality review team, who will be checking the extent to which persons are working in adherence with our standard operating procedures. We're doing again also our management reviews of the system, and we're acting in terms of identifying where there are areas of improvement and working towards addressing those areas that need improvement. So it is a very intensive system, one that starts with planning, starts with documenting, starts with identifying our targets, identifying as part of our performance management system what it is that we seek to achieve, and building those out in terms of checking if it is that we're working working towards achieving those targets, monitoring and measuring those targets, and acting where it is that we need to so act.
Okay, thank you so much, Kevin, for the time. I take this opportunity to appreciate you for giving us your time and also preparing to come and share with us the knowledge that you have, that you developed over time when you are trying to implement this quality management system. It's something which is critical. It's something that can help revenue agencies to really move forward. The issue of generating adequate revenue is something which is critical now to many organizations, and it's very important that we keep developing and creating agencies that are effective and very efficient. And we believe that a quality management system is one of the initiatives that can help revenue agencies achieve that. Thank you so much for coming on board. I also want to take this opportunity to thank all our guests that have logged in, YouTube, LinkedIn, and other channels. Thank you so much. And also, I do appreciate the TADAT Secretariat again for organizing this TADAT coffee chat. Colleagues, we meet again in the next TADAT coffee chat in 3 weeks. Have a good time. Bye-bye.
All right, and thank you too.